Chapter 35. The Tokens. And slight withal may be the things that bring back on the heart the weight which it would fling aside forever, and may be a sound, a flower, the wind, the ocean, which shall wound, striking the electric change, wherewith we're darkly bound. The sitting room of Legree's establishment was a large long room, with a wide ample fireplace. It had once been hung with a showy and expensive paper, which now hung mouldering, torn, and discolored from the damp walls. The place had that peculiar, sickening, unwholesome smell compounded of mingled damp dirt and decay, which one often notices in close old houses. The wallpaper was defaced in spots by slops of beer and wine, or garnished with chalk, memorandums, and long sums footed up, as if somebody had been practicing arithmetic there. In the fireplace stood a brazier full of burning charcoal. Though the weather was not cold, the evenings always seemed damp and chilly in that great room, and Legree moreover wanted a place to light his cigars and heat his water for punch. The ruddy glare of the charcoal displayed the confused and unpromising aspect of a room. Saddles, bridles, several sorts of harnesses, riding whips, overcoats, and various articles of clothing scattered up and down the room in confused variety, and the dogs of whom we have before spoken had encamped themselves among them to suit their own taste and convenience. Legree was just mixing himself a tumbler of punch, pouring his hot water from a cracked and broken-nosed pitcher, grumbling as he did so. Plague on that Sambo to kick up this here row between me and the new hands. The fellow won't be fit to work for a week now, right in the press of the season. Yes, just like you, said a voice behind his chair. It was the woman Cassie who had stolen upon his soliloquy. Ah, you she-devil, you've come back, have you? Yes, I have, she said coolly. Come to have my own way, too. You lie, you jade. I'll be up to my word. Either behave yourself, or stay down to the quarters and fare and work with the rest. I'd rather 10,000 times, said the woman, live in the dirtiest hole at the quarters than be under your hoof. But you are under my hoof, for all that, said he, turning upon her with a savage grin. That's one comfort, so sit down here on my knee, my dear, and hear to reason, said he, laying hold on her wrist. Simon Legree, take care, said the woman with a sharp flash of her eye, a glance so wild and insane in its light as to be almost appalling. You are afraid of me, Simon, she said deliberately. You are reasons to be, but be careful, for I've got the devil in me. The last words she whispered in a hissing tone close to his ear. Get out. I believe to my soul you have, said Legree, pushing her from him and looking uncomfortably at her. After all, Cassie, he said, why can't you be friends with me as you used to? Used to, said she bitterly. She stopped short, a word of choking feelings rising in her heart kept her silent. Cassie had always kept over Legree the kind of influence that a strong and passionate woman can ever keep over the most brutal man. But of late she had grown more and more irritable and restless under the hideous yoke of her servitude, and her irritability at times broke out into a raving insanity, and this liability made her a sort of object of dread to Legree, who had a superstitious horror of insane persons, which is common to coarse and uninstructed minds. When Legree brought Emily to her house, all the smoldering embers of womanly feelings flashed up in the worn heart of Cassie, and she took part with the girl, and a fierce quarrel ensued between her and Legree. Legree in a fury swore she should be put to field service if she would not be peaceable. Cassie with proud scorn declared she would go to the field, and she worked there one day as we have described to show how perfectly she scorned the threat. Legree was secretly uneasy all day, for Cassie had an influence over him from which he could not free himself. When she presented her basket at the scales, he had hoped for some concession, and had addressed her in a sort of half conciliatory, half scornful tone, and she had answered with the bitterest contempt. The outrageous treatment of poor Tom had roused her still more, and she had followed Legree to the house with no particular intention but to upbraid him for his brutality. "I wish, Cassie," said Legree, "you behave yourself decently." "You talk about behaving decently? What have you been doing? You haven't even you don't have enough sense enough to keep from spoiling one of our best hands right in the most pressing season, just for your devilish temper." "I was a fool, it's a fact, to let any such bangle come up," said Legree. "But when the boy set up his will, he had to be broke in." "I reckon you won't break him in, won't I?" said Legree, rising passionately. "I'd like to know if I won't. He'll be the first slave that ever come around me. I'll break every bone in his body, but he shall give up." Just then the door opened and Sambo entered. He came forward, bowing, and holding out something in a paper. "What's that, you dog?" said Legree. "It's a witch fang, master." "A what?" "Something that slaves get from witches. Keeps 'em from feeling when they're flogged." He had it tied around his neck with a black string. Legree, like most godless and cruel men, was superstitious. He took the paper and opened it uneasily. There dropped out of it a silver dollar and a long shining curl of fair hair which like a living thing twined itself round Legree's fingers. "Damnation!" he screamed in sudden passion, stamping on the floor and pulling it furiously at the hair as if it burned him. "Where did this come from? Take it off. Burn it up. Burn it up," he screamed, tearing it off and throwing it into the charcoal. "What did you bring it to me for?" Sambo stood with his heavy mouth wide open and aghast with wonder, and Cassie, who was preparing to leave the apartment, stopped and looked at him in perfect amazement. "Don't you bring me any more of your devilish things," said he, shaking his fist at Sambo, who retreated hastily towards the door, and picking up the silver dollar, he sent it smashing through the window pane out into the darkness. Sambo was glad to make his escape. When he was gone, Legree seemed a little ashamed of his fit of alarm. He sat doggedly down in his chair and began sullenly sipping his tumbler of punch. Cassie prepared herself for going out, unobserved by him, and slipped away to minister to poor Tom, as we have already related. What was the matter with Legree, and what was there in a simple curl of fair hair to appall that brutal man, familiar with every form of cruelty? To answer this, we must carry the reader backward in his history. Hard and reprobate as the godless man seemed now, there had been a time when he had been rocked on the bosom of a mother, cradled with prayers and pious hymns, his now seared brow bedwed with the waters of holy baptism. In early childhood, a fair-haired woman had led him at the sound of Sabbath bell to worship and to pray. Fair in New England, that mother had trained her only son with long, unwearied love and patient prayers. Born of a hard-tempered sire, on whom a gentle woman had wasted a world of unvalued love. Legree had followed in the steps of his father, boisterous, unruly, and tyrannical. He despised all her counsel, and would none of her reproof, and at an early age broke from her to seek his fortunes at sea. He never came home but once after, and then his mother, with the yearning of a heart that must love something, and has nothing else to love, clung to him, and sought with passionate prayers and entreaties to win him from a life of sin to a soul's eternal good. That was Legree's day of grace, and good angels called him, when he almost persuaded and mercy held him by the hand. His heart inly relented. There was a conflict, but sin got the victory, and he set all the force of his rough nature against the conviction of his conscience. He drank and swore, was wilder and more brutal than ever, and one night when his mother was in his last agony of her despair, knelt at his feet, he spurred her from him, threw her senseless on the floor, with brutal curses fled to his ship. The next Legree heard of his mother was when one night he was carousing among drunken companions. A letter was put into his hand. He opened it, and a lock of long curling hair fell from it and twined about his fingers. The letter told him his mother was dead, that dying she blessed and forgave him. There is a dread unhallowed necromancy of evil that turns things sweetest and holiest to phantoms of horror and affright. That pale loving mother, her dying prayers, her forgiving love wrought in that demonic heart of sin, only as a damning sentence bringing with it a fearful looking for of judgment and fiery indignation. Legree burned the hair and burned the letter. When he saw the hissing and crackling in the flame, inly shuddered as he thought of everlasting fires. He tried to drink and revel, and swear away the memory, but often in the deep nights whose solemn stillness arraigns the bad soul in forced communication with herself, he had seen that pale mother rising by his bedside, and felt the soft twining of that hair around his fingers, till the cold sweat would roll up down his face, and he would spring from his bed in horror. Ye who have wondered to hear in the same evangel that God is love, and that God is consuming fire, see ye not how, to the soul resolved in evil spirit, perfect love is the most fearful torture, the seal and sentence of a dirtiest despair? Blast it, said Legree to himself, as he sipped his liquor. Where did he get that? If it didn't look just like woo, I thought I forgot that. Curse me if I think there's any such thing as forgetting anything. Anyhow, hang it, I'm lonesome. I mean to call Em. She hates me, the monkey. I don't care. I'll make her come. Legree stepped out into a large entry which went upstairs by what had formerly been a superb winding staircase. But the passageway was dirty and dreary, encumbered with boxes and unsightly litter. The stairs uncarpeted, seams winding up in the gloom to nobody knew where. The pale moonlight streamed through a shattered fanlight over the door. The air was unwholesome and chilly like that of a vault. Legree stopped at the foot of the stairs and heard a voice singing. It seemed strange and ghost-like in that dreary old house, perhaps because of the already tumultuous state of his nerves. Hark! What is it? A wild, pathetic voice chants a hymn common among the slaves. Oh, there'll be mourning, mourning. Oh, there'll be mourning, mourning at the judgment seat of Christ. Blast the girl, said Legree. I'll choke her. Em, Em, he called harshly. Only a mocking echo from the walls answered him. The sweet voice still sung on. Parents and children, there shall part. Parents and children, there shall part to meet no more. And clear and loud swelled through the empty halls the refrain. Oh, there'll be mourning, mourning, mourning. Oh, there'll be mourning at the judgment seat of Christ. Legree stopped. He would have been ashamed to tell of it, but large drops of sweat stood on his forehead. His heart beat heavy and thick with fear. He even thought he saw something white rising and glimmering in the gloom before him, and shuddered to think what if the form of his dead mother should appear to him. I know one thing, he said to himself as he stumbled back in the sitting room and sat down. I'll let that fellow alone after this. What did I want of this cussed paper? I believe I am bewitched, sure enough. I've been shivering and sweating ever since. Where did he get that hair? It couldn't have been that. I burnt that up. I know I did. It would be a joke if hair could rise from the dead. Ah, Legree, that golden tress was charmed. Each hair had in it a spell of terror and remorse for thee, and was used by a mightier power to bind thy cruel hands from inflicting the uttermost evil on the helpless. I say, said Legree, stamping and whistling to the dogs, wake up, some of you, and keep me company. But the dogs only opened one eye at him sleepily and closed it again. I'll have Sambo and Quimbo up here to sing and dance one of their hell dances, and keep off these horrid notions, said Legree. And putting on his hat, he went on to the veranda and blew a horn, with which he calmly summoned his two sable drivers. Legree was often wont, when in a gracious humor, to get these two worthies into his sitting room, and after warming them up with whiskey, amuse himself by setting them up singing, dancing, or fighting as the humor took him. It was between 1 and 2 o'clock at night, as Cassie was returning from her ministrations to poor Tom, that she heard the sound of wild shrieking, whooping, hallooing, and singing from the sitting room. mingled with barking of dogs and other symptoms of general uproar. She came up on the veranda steps and looked in. Legree and both the drivers in a stable of furious intoxication were singing, whooping, upsetting chairs, and making all manner of ludicrous and horrid grimaces at each other. She rested her small, slender hand on the window blind and looked fixedly at him. There was a world of anguish, scorn, and fierce bitterness in her black eyes as she did so. Would it be a sin to rid the world of such a wretch? She said to herself. She turned hurriedly away, and passing round to the back door, glided upstairs and tapped on Emily's door.